A single decision can shatter an entire career. Dr-Aris-Thorne is about to make that decision. He is a disgraced astrophysicist, officially censured by his university for pursuing ideas they called pure fantasy. Yet he ignores their final warning. He uses his last remaining research grant to book a flight to a remote archaeological dig site in the Scottish Highlands. He has seen the data. Anomalous energy readings from that location match a pattern he found hidden within humanity's oldest legends, stories of fallen stars. He believes these echoes point to a truth so profound it could completely rewrite human history. By the end of this story, you will understand a hidden connection between our ancient past and our cosmic future, a secret woven into the very fabric of our oldest myths. What forgotten truth lies buried beneath those Scottish stones? And wherever you are in the world right now, listening to this, I am genuinely curious. What does the night sky look like above you tonight? The cold Scottish mist clung to his coat as Aris-Thorne stood before the newly uncovered standing stone. It was taller than a person, its surface scarred by millennia of wind and rain, yet it felt unnervingly new. The head archaeologist had explicitly forbidden him from scanning it, calling his theories an embarrassment to serious science. But Aris had never been good at following orders. Under the cover of a brewing twilight storm, he deployed his portable sensor array, the device humming to life against the ancient rock. The reading it returned was impossible. The stone was emitting a steady, low-frequency resonance, a hum so deep it was felt more than heard. He cross-referenced the frequency pattern against his star charts, his breath catching in his throat. It was a perfect alignment with Lyra, a constellation that modern astronomy classified as acoustically silent, a dead region of space. His triumph was short-lived. The head archaeologist, Dr. Reid, found him there. The resulting confrontation was swift and brutal. Aris was officially barred from the site, his credentials revoked on the spot. As security escorted him out, a young woman brushed past him. It was Alara, a junior archaeologist who had always watched his work with quiet interest. In that brief moment, her hand found his, and a small, cold data chip was pressed into his palm. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was the point of no return. To accept this stolen data was to burn every last bridge to his professional life, but to ignore it was to abandon the truth. Clenching the chip in his fist, he made his choice. He would trust her. Back in his rented room in a nearby village, with the wind howling outside, he plugged the chip into his laptop. The data was a treasure trove of restricted findings, geological surveys, and translated glyphs that Reid's team had kept secret. As he pieced it together with his own resonance data, a terrifying picture emerged. The standing stone was not a destination, it was a signpost. Its resonant frequency was a pointer, a cosmic arrow aimed at a second, far more remote location, deep within the Himalayas. This was no longer just about validation. It was a summons, and as this realization dawned, an email arrived from his university. Dr. Reid had formally reported his trespass, initiating proceedings that would strip him of his final academic title. He was now completely untethered, a man with nothing left to lose, staring at a map leading to the roof of the world. The stolen date, a chip, held more than just coordinates. It contained a name, a place whispered only in the archives of failed expeditions, the Whispering Codex. It was not a myth, but a real, forgotten monastic library carved into a Greek mountainside, a place said to hold star charts that predated the telescope by centuries. With his reputation in ashes and a growing sense of urgency, Aris used the last of his personal funds to book a flight to a remote Aegean island. The journey felt like a descent into a different world, one where time moved slower and secrets were kept closer to the chest. The library itself was a cavern of silence and dust, illuminated by slivers of sunlight cutting through high, narrow windows. The resident keeper, a stern man with eyes that had seen too many treasure hunters, regarded Aris with open suspicion. He was allowed to see the manuscripts, but only under the keeper's unblinking gaze. For days, Aris worked in that hallowed silence, his fingers carefully tracing the vellum pages of medieval astronomical texts. The illustrations were beautiful, intricate diagrams of constellations, but something was off. The stars were slightly out of place, their positions subtly wrong according to known celestial patterns. It was not a mistake, it was a code. His breakthrough came at the end of his third day, his mind frayed with exhaustion. He laid 3 different star charts from 3 different centuries over one another, holding them up to the light. The misaligned stars from each page suddenly connected, their positions forming a coherent, single pattern. A map. It was a route, a path through the heavens pointing toward a specific, uncharted sector of deep space. In his exhilaration, his elbow knocked a heavy, metal reading lamp from the table. The crash was deafening in the quiet library. The keeper rushed over, his face a mask of anger, but Aris' attention was fixed on a small, dark panel high on the stone wall. A tiny red light he had never noticed before was now blinking steadily. It was a silent alarm. The look on the keeper's face shifted from anger to something else, something like fear. He wasn't just a guardian of knowledge, he was a warden, and Aris had just triggered the prison's alert. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was out of time. Apologizing profusely for his clumsiness, he gathered his things under the keeper's wary stare. But as he folded his notes, he palmed the small, high-resolution camera he had used to photograph the layered maps, slipping it into his pocket. He had the coordinates. He fled the library, the feeling of unseen eyes burning into his back with every step. He wasn't just racing toward an answer and a more. He was racing against someone else, a rival he could not see, a shadowy organization that clearly knew the secret he was unraveling. The quest for truth had just become a hunt, and he was now the prey. With the new celestial coordinates burning a hole in his mind, Aris headed for the most desolate mountain range on his map, unaware that the footsteps of his pursuers were already echoing his own. The Egyptian sun was a hammer on the baked desert floor. For 3 days, Aris had traced the geometric patterns from the codex onto satellite images until he found it, a nearly invisible fissure in the rock, perfectly aligned with the rising of Sirius. The entrance was a tight squeeze, a jagged mouth leading into absolute darkness. The air that rose from it was cool and carried the scent of ages. His geological training was his only guide now, his fingers reading the striations in the tunnel walls like a map, identifying the unstable shale that threatened to collapse at any moment. He moved with a painstaking slowness, each step a calculated risk in a tomb that had been waiting for him. Deeper and deeper he went, until the tunnel opened into a circular chamber. And there, resting on a stone pedestal in the center, was the source of the resonance. It was a device of crystalline latticework, pulsing with a soft, internal light that had no obvious source. It was beautiful and utterly alien. He reached for it, his heart thundering in his ears. The ambush was silent and efficient. Dark-clad figures emerged from the shadows he had not seen, their movements fluid and practiced. One of them clamped a hand on his shoulder, while another made a grab for the backpack containing his research. There were too many of them, and the chamber was too small for a real fight. His mind raced, discarding one hopeless plan after another. Then his eyes fell on a cracked limestone pillar, its surface webbed with fractures, supporting a section of the ceiling directly above the tunnel entrance. It was a desperate, terrible gamble. Shoving the crystalline device into his own pack, he threw his entire weight against the pillar. The sound was a deep, groaning crack that shook the very foundations of the chamber. The agents froze for a critical second, their training failing them in the face of raw, geological collapse. Then the ceiling came down in a roar of dust and stone, sealing the entrance in an instant and plunging the chamber into a silence more profound than any he had ever known. He was trapped. The air was thick with dust, and his flashlight beam cut a weak swath through the darkness, revealing his new reality. He was buried alive, with only a single bottle of water and a piece of technology that might be his only way out or his tombstone. Sitting cross-legged before the artifact, he ran his hands over its cool, intricate surface. His fingers found a subtle depression, a pattern that mirrored the star map from the codex. He pressed it. The chamber vanished, or rather, it was replaced by a breathtaking holographic starscape that bloomed from the device, mapping the entire galaxy in shimmering, three-dimensional light. A figure composed of pure energy resolved in the center of the projection, its form vaguely humanoid, but utterly unlike any human. It did not speak with a voice he heard with his ears, but with concepts that bloomed directly in his mind, a silent, profound communication that transcended language. It was a message, a recording from a civilization that had watched the stars grow cold, and it was beginning. The concepts bloomed in his mind, not as words, but as pure understanding, a terrifying history lesson from the stars. The energy being identified itself as a watcher, a final sentinel of a civilization that had long since turned to dust. It had not come here. It had been left behind. Its purpose was to guard this world, to maintain a network of ancient beacons that masked Earth's emergent energy signature from a predator that drifted between the galaxies. They called it the Star Eater. It was a cosmic entity, a force of nature that consumed sentient energy, drawn to civilizations as they reached a certain technological threshold. Humanity's radio transmissions, its power grids, its first tentative steps into space. It was all a dinner bell ringing in the void. The standing stones, the pyramids, the hidden temples. They were not monuments. They were camouflage, a planetary stealth system built by a long-vanished race who saw our potential and sought to protect it. And now, after millennia of silence, the system was failing. The resonance Aris had detected was not a greeting. It was a distress signal. His scientific mind rebelled, a storm of denial and rationalization. This was everything his colleagues had warned him about, the descent into pure fantasy. Yet the data was irrefutable, the resonance pattern a perfect carrier wave for information his own brain could decode. He was not talking to an alien. He was interfacing with a message in a bottle, and the bottle was screaming that the sea was on fire. The weight of it crushed him. This was not a discovery to be published. It was a countdown to extinction. He could not prove this to the world. No one would believe a disgraced academic with a story of cosmic monsters. He needed proof, and he needed allies. He had to find others who could see the patterns, who could help him verify the Watcher's warning and find a way to either repair the beacons or find another solution. His own survival was suddenly irrelevant. The entire human race was now the subject of his experiment. His escape was a frantic, claustrophobic ordeal. Using the last of his gear, he identified a secondary weakness in the chamber's wall, a fissure that led to a narrow underground river. He spent hours in freezing, pitch-black water, the alien device sealed in his pack, before finally washing out into a barren wadi under the blistering sun. He was exhausted, dehydrated, and utterly changed. Finding a weak signal on his satellite phone, he dialed the only number he trusted. Alara answered on the second ring, her voice a mixture of relief and alarm. He didn't try to explain over the airwaves. He simply gave her a set of coordinates for a remote meeting place and 4 names: a geologist who understood planetary resonance, a linguist who had decoded dead languages, a rogue network engineer, and a historian of failed states. They were the best in their fields, and they were all like him, on the outside looking in. "We have one chance," he told her, his voice raw, "and we are all that is left of the watch." The abandoned monastery in the Greek mountains felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Aris watched the single road winding through the valley below, every distant car a potential threat. When Alara finally arrived, her face was pale with a fear he recognized, the terror of someone who has just crossed a line with no way back. He didn't speak. He simply placed the crystalline device on the dusty stone floor between them and activated the starscape. The holographic galaxy bloomed in the dim light, and then the Watcher's silent communication flooded the room. He watched her expression shift from professional curiosity to stunned disbelief, and finally, to a horrified acceptance that mirrored his own. She reached out a trembling hand, not to touch the projection, but as if to feel the truth of it. "You cannot fake this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This technology does not exist. Not here, not now." Her skepticism, the very foundation of her training, shattered against the impossible evidence. She was in. Alara's archaeological network became their only weapon. While Aris was a pariah, she still had contacts, curators, and researchers who trusted her judgment. She began a discreet, digital excavation, searching for patterns in ancient texts and site surveys that matched the resonance frequencies Aris had recorded. They were no longer just looking for history. They were looking for the components of a planetary defense system built by ghosts. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, yet it was all they had. Every message they sent was a risk, every phone call a potential trap. They knew the agents who had cornered Aris in Egypt were still out there, a faceless organization with unknown motives. Were they trying to silence the truth, or did they want to control the beacons for themselves? The not knowing was a constant, gnawing pressure. In the end, the map was too vast, and the clock was ticking too fast. They made the difficult decision to split their efforts. Alara would return to the digital archives, using her expertise to pinpoint the next beacon location from the safety of a hidden day, a haven. Aris, armed with the new coordinates she would decipher, would travel to the most promising site, a remote peak in the Andes where the air was thin and secrets were easily kept. As she bent over her laptop, cross-referencing Incan stellar myths with geological surveys, Aris packed a single bag. Their communication would be sparse and encrypted, a dangerous game of coded phrases sent over untraceable channels. Every word they exchanged from this moment forward could lead their hunters right to them. The fate of humanity now rested on a fragile, invisible thread stretched between two fugitives, racing against an enemy they could not see, toward a hope they could barely comprehend. The air at 18,000 feet was a thin, burning cold. Every breath Aris drew felt like a failure, his lungs screaming for oxygen that simply wasn't there. The pre-Incan observatory was little more than a ring of shattered stone teeth, jutting from the wind-scoured peak, a skeleton picked clean by centuries. This was the place Alara's research had pinpointed, a nexus in the ancient camouflage network. His head throbbed, a brutal combination of altitude sickness and the crushing pressure of what he had to do. The instructions from the Watcher's message were clear, yet impossibly abstract. He had to realign 3 massive, frozen stone dials with specific constellations, calibrating them not to observe the stars, but to sing back to them. His fingers, numb and clumsy inside his gloves, fumbled with his laser transit. The first dial, a monolithic slab of andesite, was the easiest. He shifted its immense weight incrementally until a faint, resonant hum vibrated up through the soles of his boots. The second alignment was a nightmare. A freezing gale threatened to tear him from the mountain, and he had to brace his entire body against the stone, inching it into position by sheer force of will. His vision swam with dark spots. He was so cold, he could no longer feel his own face. This was the moment of irrevocable choice. Activating this beacon would be like setting off a cosmic flare, a signal that would be impossible to hide. He thought of the Star Eater, a silent, patient hunger moving between the galaxies. He thought of every light on Earth going dark, forever. There was no choice at all. With a final, grinding shove, he locked the third dial into place. For a single, heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then the world turned inside out. A silent wave of energy erupted from the stone circle, not as light or sound, but as a pressure that flattened him against the rock. High above, the very air seemed to shimmer and warp. In his pack, every electronic device he owned simultaneously died with a faint sizzle. He didn't need a news report to know what was happening. All across the planet, in that exact moment, satellite feeds would be flickering, GPS systems failing, and communications networks crashing in a wave of inexplicable static. He had done it. He had proven the Watcher's story was terrifyingly, undeniably real. Stumbling down from the summit hours later, his body was a wreck of exhaustion and euphoria. He found a tiny village with a single dusty cantina that had a television buzzing in the corner. The screen was a chaos of split images and frantic news anchors. Scientists were baffled. Military spokespeople were issuing tight-lipped statements about a solar flare. But one graphic, flashed on the screen for just a moment, showed the estimated epicenter of the electromagnetic pulse. It was a circle, right over the Andes, right over his head. They didn't know his name yet, but they knew the location. The hunt was no longer a quiet pursuit by shadowy agents. It was a global panic, a desperate scrabble by every major power and corporate entity on Earth to find the source of this impossible power. He had lit a beacon to save the world, and in doing so, he had painted a target on his own back for all of it to see. The race was now a stampede. Antarctica was a white, burning silence that swallowed all sound. The research station was a cluster of metal modules huddled against the endless ice, a tiny island of frantic human activity in a sea of absolute stillness. Aris met Alara in a cramped maintenance bay, their breath pluming in the frigid air. She had gotten there first, using her archaeological credentials to join a paleoclimatology team, her face drawn tight with a new, sharp anxiety. The station director, a man named Croft, had been overly helpful, his questions a little too pointed, his interest in their geological survey feeling more like an interrogation. The atmosphere inside the pressurized corridors was thick with unspoken suspicion. They found the outpost because the Watcher's device told them where to look. It was a faint, persistent hum from the crystalline artifact in Aris's pack, a resonance that grew stronger as they used a supply run as cover to trek toward a remote ice ridge. Using a portable ground-penetrating radar unit Alara had smuggled in, they located the structure buried under 300 feet of solid ice, a perfect geometric shape that nature could never have formed. Gaining access was a week-long ordeal of secretly rerouting thermal drills and lying to Croft about faulty equipment. When they finally melted through to a hollow space, they rappelled down into a chamber of frozen time. The air was ancient and still. The walls were a seamless, metallic alloy that glowed with a soft, internal bioluminescence. In the center of the room, seated in a chair that seemed grown from the floor itself, was a figure. It was humanoid, tall and slender, its features elegant and utterly alien, preserved in a clear, cryogenic stasis field. This was a watcher, not a projection, but one of the builders themselves. In its long, crystalline hands, it held a single, pulsing date, a crystal. Alara, with an archaeologist's reverent care, gently retrieved it. Back in Alara's quarters, with the door locked and a radio playing static to mask their conversation, they plugged the crystal into a heavily modified tablet. The logs that flooded the screen were not in any language, but a cascade of images, sensations, and concepts. They witnessed the last stand. They saw the Watcher's civilization at its height, a galaxy-spanning network of light and life. Then they saw the Star Eater approach, a vast, dark turbulence in the fabric of space itself, a void that consumed light and thought. The Watchers fought, unleashing energies that could shatter stars, but it was like trying to fight a tide with a spear. The entity could not be destroyed. It was a fundamental force of cosmic entropy, a predator that culled sentience itself. Their only victory was a desperate, brilliant act of misdirection. They built the beacon network, a planetary cloaking device designed to make Earth appear as just another silent, lifeless rock. This outpost was their last command center, and the being in the ice was its final guardian, left in hibernation to monitor the system it knew would one day fail. The beacons were not just camouflage. They were a circuit. To re-establish the shield, they had to be activated in a precise sequence, a symphony of resonance that would cloak the entire planet. The final beacon, the keystone, was in a location that made Aris's blood run cold. It was deep within the Tepui jungles of Southeast Asia, a place of sheer cliffs and isolated ecosystems, a natural fortress. A soft chime from the door panel made them both jump. It was Director Croft, his voice smooth and unnervingly calm through the intercom. He was requesting an immediate update on their core sample analysis. His timing was not a coincidence. They shared a single, terrified glance. He knew he was waiting for them to finish the download. With frantic speed, Alara initiated a data transfer, copying the entire crystal archive to a hidden partition on her tablet, while Aris created a decoy, a corrupted file folder. They would have to run right now and trust that the harsh environment outside was safer than the polite containment inside this station. Slipping out through a service airlock into the blinding white hell of an Antarctic storm, they left the warmth and lies behind. The final piece of the puzzle was in their hands, and the most perilous leg of the journey lay ahead, in a green, suffocating darkness where the sky was never visible. The humid air of the Cambodian jungle was a thick, wet blanket, and every breath tasted of decay and blooming orchids. The temple was not a ruin, but a machine disguised as one, its moss-covered stones humming with a latent power that made the hair on Alara's arms stand up. They moved through overgrown corridors where shifting light from ceiling apertures projected star patterns onto the floor, and a single misstep would trigger a volley of poisoned darts from the walls. Aris, with his understanding of resonance, identified the harmonic keys. Alara, with her knowledge of archaic engineering, found the pressure plates and counterweights. It was a deadly dance, a partnership forged in desperation. When they finally reached the inner sanctum, a circular chamber opened to the sky, they found the beacon, a massive obsidian monolith covered in pulsating glyphs. Activating it was the final piece of the celestial puzzle. As Aris aligned the last crystal rod with the rising moon, the monolith flared with a silent, violet light. A wave of pure energy shot upward, and for a glorious moment, the entire network was online, a shield of invisible sound enveloping the earth. But the victory was instantaneously shattered. The ancient stones, unable to contain the surge, groaned in protest. A deep crack tore up the wall, and the ceiling began to rain down heavy blocks of sandstone. They were not alone. The rival agents, led by a coldly efficient woman they had seen at the Antarctic station, burst into the chamber, their eyes locked on the now dormant core crystal at the monolith's heart. There was no time for a fight. The temple was coming down around them. Aris shoved the warm crystal into Alara's hands and looked at her, his face calm amid the chaos. His work was done. The network was active. She had to get the core data to the final location. Go, he yelled over the roar of collapsing stone. He turned and ran not toward the exit, but deeper into the crumbling sanctum, drawing the agent's fire and attention, giving her the precious seconds she needed to slip through a collapsing archway. The last thing Alara saw before the corridor sealed behind her was the entire central chamber, buckling inward, burying Aris and his pursuers under a mountain of ancient rock. She escaped into the steaming jungle, the core crystal clutched to her chest, utterly alone. The world believed a renegade scientist had died in a remote archaeological disaster. Only she knew he had given his life to buy the planet a few more moments of safety. In a hidden safe house, her grief a sharp, cold stone in her throat, she immersed herself in the complete data archive. The puzzle was finally whole. The global network was active, but unstable, a temporary patch on a failing system. The final step was not another activation, but a synchronization. All the beacons, from Scotland to the Andes to this jungle, had to pulse in perfect, planet-wide harmony, their frequencies locked by a single, overriding signal. And the only place on Earth powerful and isolated enough to broadcast that coordinating pulse was the geomagnetic North Pole, at the very axis of the world itself. The race was not over. It had simply become a solo pilgrimage to the top of the world. The weight of Eris's notebook felt heavier than the stolen core crystal in her pack. Alara was an archaeologist, a seeker of quiet truths in dust and stone, not a leader of a desperate rebellion. Yet his theories, his frantic scribbles in the margins, were now her only map. She reached out to the names he had once trusted, a scattered network of brilliant minds pushed to the fringes of their fields, a renegade climatologist in Norway, a disgraced satellite engineer in Brazil, a physicist in Japan who had lost her funding for studying impossible energy signatures. They were all people who had seen the cracks in the official story, and when Alara showed them the synchronized data from the activated beacons, they did not need much convincing. They saw the same terrifying pattern. Funding came from anonymous donors in the global scientific community, whispers of money routed through shell companies and encrypted channels. It was just enough to charter a rugged, ice-rated transport plane and secure cold weather gear, but their actions had not gone unnoticed. The massive energy corporations, whose global power grids and experimental deep space projects were leaking the very emissions that drew the Star Eater, launched a swift and brutal counterattack. On every major news network, Alara and her new team were branded as radical eco-terrorists, accused of sabotaging vital infrastructure and causing the very atmospheric chaos they were trying to prevent. The world saw them as criminals, not saviors. Holding the team together became a daily battle against fear and doubt. The climatologist argued for a more public approach. The engineer worried their equipment would be tracked. Alara's guilt was a constant shadow. Eris should be here, she would think, watching the northern lights flare with unnatural, violent colors in the night sky. He was the visionary. She was just the one he had left behind. In a moment of crushing solitude, she opened his notebook to a random page. He had scrawled a single line, underlined twice. A truth no one believes is still a truth. Act on it. The next morning, she gathered the team in their makeshift hangar. Her voice was quiet but firm. We proceed to the pole, she stated. The probability of failure is high. The probability of capture is even higher. But the probability of our extinction, if we do nothing, is 100%. The choice was made. The strange atmospheric phenomena were escalating. Skies over major cities shimmered with silent, geometric patterns. Birds flew in perfect, unnatural spirals. It was as if reality itself was straining under an approaching weight. The entity was not just coming. It was already beginning to press against the edges of their world. Their plane climbed above the cloud layer, heading north into the perpetual twilight of the Arctic Circle. For a few hours, There was only the steady drone of the engines and the vast, white expanse below. Then the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with alarm. He had a radar contact, fast and military. Alara moved to a window, her breath catching. 2 sleek gray jet fighters were closing in from the east, their silhouettes sharp and menacing against the pale horizon. They had been found. The plane shuddered as its skis bit into the polar ice, a jarring landing in a world of blinding white. They had evaded the fighters by flying dangerously low, using a sudden storm front for cover, but the reprieve was temporary. The corporate security forces were already there, a line of black-clad figures and armored snow crawlers, forming a grim perimeter around the ancient geomagnetic spire. As her team scrambled to unload the synchronization array, their breath pluming in the 40 below air, Alara walked out to meet the commander. He was a man carved from the same ice that surrounded them, his face impassive behind a frost-rimmed visor. He gave a simple, brutal ultimatum: stand down and surrender the technology, or be removed. The standoff was a fragile, frozen thing. Alara knew they could not win a fight. But the environment itself was their ally. She ordered her team to deploy sonic emitters, not as weapons, but to vibrate the snowpack around their position, creating an unstable moat of potential avalanches. The corporate soldiers, formidable as they were, hesitated to advance into a shifting, white death. Negotiation was their only real weapon. Alara approached the commander, her tablet held out like a shield. She offered him everything: the complete scientific data, the schematics for the array, all of it. In exchange, she asked for a single, uninterrupted hour to prove its function. It was a desperate bluff. She had no intention of surrendering the core crystal, the true key to the network. She was selling him a lie, betting his greed for the technology would outweigh his orders for immediate seizure. The commander studied her, his eyes cold and calculating. He agreed to the hour, but his concession was a trap. Alara could see it in the slight tightening of his jaw. He would let them do the difficult work of activating the array, and then his forces would move in to claim a fully operational prize. The race was on. Her team worked with a frantic, silent efficiency, assembling the delicate dish of the array at the base of the natural spire, connecting it to the core crystal. The wind howled, and the ice seemed to groan in sympathy. With minutes left, the array hummed to life, its central emitter glowing with a soft blue light. It was ready. At that moment, a figure stumbled from the blowing snow, leaning heavily on an improvised ice axe. His face was gaunt, scarred, and weathered by an ordeal she thought had killed him. It was Aris. He was alive. He had clawed his way out of the temple rubble, more dead than alive, and had spent weeks in a desperate, cross-continental trek to follow the resonance, to find her here at the end of the world. His eyes met hers, filled with a pain and purpose that stole her breath. The commander, seeing the array was active, gave the signal. His soldiers began their advance. His presence was a ghost made real, a figure from a tomb, standing against the polar wind. Aris did not pause for reunions. His eyes went straight to the synchronization array, its delicate dish trembling in the gale. He moved past Alara, his voice a raw, commanding scrape, as he began calling out adjustments to the terrified technician. His hands, though scarred and shaking, flew across the control panel with an instinctive certainty. The team, moments from breaking, saw his absolute focus and found their own, but the corporate commander saw it too. He watched Aris take control and knew his chance to steal a dormant prize was gone. He gave the order. The line of black-clad soldiers surged forward, their heavy boots crunching into the unstable snow. The first sonic emitter was overrun in seconds. Aris grabbed Alara's arm, his grip firm. "You finish the sequence," he said, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. "I will hold the node." It was not a request. It was a division of their oldest skills. He was the theorist who had become a soldier. She was the excavator who had become a savior. He turned and ran toward the array's central pillar, a lone figure planting himself between the advancing line and the heart of their only hope. Alara forced her eyes back to the data stream, her fingers flying across the tablet. The final input was a cascade of celestial coordinates, a song for the planet to sing. Above them, the sky itself was tearing open. The shimmering geometric patterns coalesced into a vast, dark nebula, a silent, swirling eye that was now clearly looking down. The air grew thin and cold, not from the Arctic, but from the void. The first corporate soldiers reached the inner perimeter, and Aris met them with nothing but a makeshift ice axe and a profound understanding of resonance. He slammed the axe into the ice at his feet, striking a precise, hidden fault line. The ground shuddered, and a web of cracks shot out, swallowing the lead agents in a cloud of powdered snow. It was a delaying action, a scientist's trick. He could not stop them all. As the remaining forces closed in, Alara entered the final command. The array erupted. A pillar of pure, silent light shot from the dish, so intense it bleached the color from the world. The corporate assault froze, every man shielding his eyes from the blinding radiance. For a single, suspended moment, the entire battlefield was bathed in an impossible, unifying glow. The synchronization sequence had begun. The pillar of light did not fade. It intensified, pulling energy from the very air, from the magnetic field of the planet itself. Aris stood before it, a stark silhouette, as the corporate commander broke through the final line of defense. The man's face was a mask of fury and greed, his weapon raised not at Aris, but at the glowing heart of the array. "You are stealing a power that belongs to humanity," he snarled, his voice barely audible over the harmonic scream of the synchronizing beacons. Aris did not argue. He saw the man's single-minded fixation, the desire to possess the technology blinding him to its true function. With a final, deliberate step, Aris placed himself directly in front of a secondary power conduit, a thick crystalline cable that was pulsing with a dangerous, erratic light. It was overloading, the system straining under the immense energy flow. "Take it then," Aris shouted, a challenge and an invitation. The commander took the bait. He lunged, shoving Aris aside and grabbing the conduit with both hands, believing he was seizing control. The energy surge did not discriminate. A flash of blinding white light consumed him, and he crumpled to the ice, neutralized by the very power he sought to own. In that same instant, the synchronization locked. The singular beam of light from the array fractured into 1,000 threads, arcing up and out, connecting invisibly with every other beacon on the globe. A dome of redirected energy snapped into place around the entire planet, a shield of resonant silence. High above, the vast, dark eye of the entity paused. It had been drawn to the cacophony of a fledgling technological civilization. Now, It perceived only the quiet hum of a barren world. The swirling nebula slowly dissipated, its hunger moving on to other, noisier pastures in the cosmic deep. The silence that followed was absolute. The array, its purpose fulfilled, shattered into a million inert pieces, its core crystal turning to dust. The planetary shield was active, but its architect was gone. The world was saved by a machine it would never know existed. Within the hour, unmarked Vital aircraft descended from the cloud cover. Soldiers in generic gray uniforms, belonging to a covert United Nations science division that officially did not exist, secured the area. They had been monitoring the anomalous energy readings for years, unable to act until the threat became undeniable. They extracted Aris and Alara, along with her small team, with a quiet, efficient urgency. Their story, the truth of the celestial predator and the ancient shield, was deemed too destabilizing for public knowledge. The official report would list the event as an unprecedented geomagnetic storm, and the corporate casualties as the result of a tragic, failed industrial experiment. They had won, but their victory was a secret they would be forced to carry, a hidden burden for a world that would sleep soundly under a protected sky, never knowing how close it had come to eternal night. The sterile white room offered no comfort, only the hum of hidden ventilation and the weight of their shared secret. The debriefing was led by a calm, older woman from the Covert Science Division, her questions precise and her understanding terrifyingly complete. She did not offer them freedom. She offered them a new kind of prison, a life of quiet service inside the very system they had defied. They would be given resources, a hidden laboratory, and a single mandate to help manage the truth of humanity's fragile, sheltered existence. The entity was gone, but the beacons remained, a planetary defense system that now required monitoring and one day renewal. Aris and Alara looked at each other across the steel table, the unspoken agreement passing between them. They would accept, but not without conditions. Their entire team received full, unconditional pardons, their records wiped clean, and the true nature of the beacons, the existence of the Star Eater, all of it would be sealed in a black file, accessible only to a handful of people across the generations. Revealing it would not bring enlightenment, the woman explained. It would bring global panic, a collapse of economic and social structures, and a frantic, dangerous race to weaponize the very technology that kept them safe. The decision to conceal the truth was a different kind of sacrifice. Aris, who had spent his life chasing a revelation he could shout from the rooftops, now had to bury the greatest discovery in human history. Alara, who believed in the power of shared knowledge, had to become a gatekeeper of the ultimate secret. They chose to see their new roles not as jailers of truth, but as its gardeners. From within their secured facility, they would work to subtly steer scientific inquiry, to fund research into unified field theory and cosmic consciousness, to gently nudge humanity toward a deeper, more mature understanding of its place in the cosmos, without ever revealing the terrifying reason why. They became the silent guardians of a world, you too fragile to survive the light of day. Their victory was a burden that would never lift, just as the rhythm of their new lives began to feel like a strange kind of normal. A new signal arrived. It did not come from Earth's network of beacons. It originated from a point in deep space, from the last known vector of the Watcher's vanished civilization. The signal was not a warning or a distress call. It was a simple, repeating sequence of mathematical constants and biological prime codes, a greeting. It was a hello from ghosts, a message from the very civilization they believed had been completely erased, and it carried a single, profound implication. They were not as alone as they had thought. Their new home was a converted missile silo buried deep beneath the New Mexico desert, a place where secrets were already part of the architecture. They called it the Aegis Institute, a name that reflected its purpose without revealing it. Aris and Alara became its directors, its chief architects of a hidden science. They brought in the climatologist from Norway, the engineer from Brazil, and the physicist from Japan, offering them not just pardons, but a mission that gave their exile meaning. This was not a workplace. It was a sanctuary for those who had seen the impossible and could never go back to a normal world. They became a family bound by the heaviest of truths. Every discovery they made was a paradox. They were reverse engineering technology that defied known physics, yet they could never publish a paper. They were protecting a planet that could never know it was in danger. The tension was a constant, low hum in the background, like the resonance of the very beacons they monitored. A single leaked email, one careless conversation, could unravel everything. They lived in a world of airlocks and encrypted servers, their greatest breakthroughs confined to a server that had no connection to the outside internet. One evening, while running a new predictive algorithm on old Watcher data, Aris found a pattern he had missed before. It was subtle, a harmonic echo within the primary camouflage frequency. He had always interpreted the fallen star's echoes as a warning, a desperate signal of past danger, but this new data suggested something else. The pattern was not a scream of alarm. It was structured, complex, and repeating. It was a message waiting for a reply. The echoes were not just a story of something that had been lost. They were an invitation to join a conversation that had been going on for eons. The signal from deep space was no longer a ghost in the machine. It was a conversation waiting to happen, and Aris was determined to find the words. Late one night, running a new simulation on the dormant beacon network, he saw it. The entire planetary system, designed for camouflage, could be subtly reconfigured by shifting the resonance frequencies from a dampening hum to a focused, coherent pulse. They could transform the Earth into a single, giant transmitter, capable of sending a reply across the light years. It was not a shield anymore. It was a telephone. The implications were staggering. Humanity could announce its presence to a community of civilizations that had survived the cosmic predator, a galactic community that had left a calling card. But it was also the ultimate risk. What if their message was intercepted by something else, something with a different kind of hunger? The Institute fractured under the weight of the decision. The climatologist argued they had been given a stewardship, not an invitation, and to alter the system was a betrayal of the Watcher's design. The engineer countered that the very existence of the signal was a test, a challenge to see if humanity was mature enough to take its place among the stars. The debate raged in the sterile meeting rooms, a quiet war of philosophies. Alara listened to all of it, her own mind a battleground. She had seen the cost of cosmic secrets, the blood and sacrifice that had bought their quiet world. To risk it all on a single transmission felt like a reckless gamble, but to ignore the call, to choose permanent isolation out of fear, felt like a different kind of extinction. She found Eris in the main lab, surrounded by holographic schematics of the beacon network. He looked up, his eyes filled with a familiar, terrifying fire. "We have to try," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Staying silent is a choice too, and it is a choice to remain a child in the dark, forever." After a long, silent moment, she nodded. They would build a prototype, a single, low-power device that could send a tightly focused reply without activating the entire global network. It would be a whisper, not a shout. Every safety protocol was tripled. The message itself was a work of art and science, a complex mathematical proof of their sentience, a sampling of Earth's biodiversity, and a recording of a human heartbeat. They worked in shifts, the tension, a physical presence in the underground lab. Then, as the final components of the prototype communicator were being integrated, their global sensor net lit up. From the standing stones in Scotland, to the Andean peak, to the Cambodian jungle, every dormant beacon site began emitting a faint, synchronized energy pulse. It was not a signal they were sending, it was a signal they were receiving. The Earth itself was awakening, its ancient stones humming in anticipation, as if the planet had been waiting for this moment for 1,000,000 years and was now holding its breath. The desert air was electric, with a silence that felt louder than any noise. Inside the remote facility, the team gathered around the prototype communicator, a tangle of wires and crystalline nodes humming with latent power. This was the moment. With a shared, nervous glance, Aris initiated the sequence. A low thrum built in the air, vibrating through the concrete floor as a single, focused pulse of coherent data was launched into the cosmos. It was a message of peace, a mathematical proof of their existence, and a humble request for knowledge. The light from the console flared brilliantly, and then, with a final, gasping surge, it died. The entire facility plunged into absolute darkness, every light and screen extinguished. The prototype had drawn every joule of power from the local grid, leaving them in a void of their own making. They waited in that oppressive quiet, the only sound their own breathing. Had they just announced humanity's presence to a benevolent community, or had they rung a dinner bell for an unseen horror? The weight of the gamble was a physical pressure in the room. After an hour of tense debate, Alara made the call. They would wait 48 hours. If no reply came in that time, they would dismantle the project entirely and seal the data, accepting their cosmic solitude. It was a brutal compromise between hope and prudence. The next 2 days were an agony of strained nerves. They monitored the silent consoles, jumped at every creak of the building, and watched the empty desert sky. The future of human evolution, the chance to step out of the cradle and into a wider universe, hung on a dark, unresponsive machine. With only minutes remaining on their self-imposed deadline, a collective despair had begun to settle over the group. Aris had already started powering down the secondary systems, his movements heavy with resignation. Then, without a sound, the main console screen flickered to life. It did not display text or a complex data stream. Instead, it showed a single, intricate symbol, a complex, interlocking pattern of geometry and light that somehow conveyed a sense of profound welcome, ancient wisdom, and overwhelming relief. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was now filled with a single, undeniable truth. They were not alone, and the conversation had just begun. The symbol burned on the screen, a silent enigma of impossible geometry. For 3 days, the team worked in a frantic, sleepless rotation, pouring every analytical tool they had into its deconstruction. The breakthrough came from their Japanese physicist, who realized the symbol was not a static image, but a data-dense construct, a multi-layered instruction manual written in the language of physics itself. It was a key. The first layer they unlocked described a fundamental principle of quantum entanglement that allowed for near-perfect energy transfer over any distance, eliminating transmission loss. The second layer revealed a method for synthesizing a room temperature superconductor from common silica and carbon. This was not just advanced science, it was a toolkit to rebuild human civilization from the ground up. The potential was staggering. They could end the global energy crisis within a decade, power entire cities with the output of a single small reactor, and render fossil fuels obsolete overnight. But the euphoria was instantly tempered by a cold, practical dread. Releasing such technology abruptly would not be a gift, it would be a detonator. The entire global economy, built on the scaffolding of energy scarcity, would shatter. Nations would scramble to weaponize the principles, triggering arms races that would make the nuclear age look primitive. Control of this knowledge was now a responsibility as immense as facing the Star Eater had been. In the Institute's main conference room, the old divisions resurfaced, but the stakes were infinitely higher. Aris, haunted by his past as an outcast, argued passionately for a slow, controlled drip feed of the technology. "We create shell companies," he proposed, his voice low and intense. "We patent the components separately through anonymous trusts and license them exclusively for humanitarian purposes, for cleaning up pollution and providing base load power to the developing world. Let the world believe it is innovating its way to these discoveries. We guide the river, we do not break the dam." It was a plan that required immense patience and secrecy, a silent stewardship of human progress. The team reluctantly agreed, understanding that the right thing and the safe thing had to be the same. They began drafting the intricate framework for their benevolent deception, a project that would define their legacy far more than their secret victory over an alien entity. It was then that their security chief interrupted, his face grim. Their external sensor net had detected sophisticated, unauthorized scans of the facility's perimeter, probing for weaknesses. The massive power surge from their prototype transmission had not gone unnoticed. A new player was on the board, and they were already knocking at the door. Their public facade was a masterpiece of benevolent deception. They launched the Prometheus Energy Initiative, a project lauded for its revolutionary, yet plausibly terrestrial, advances in superconductivity and wireless power transmission. The world celebrated them as visionary pioneers, and the flood of grant money and public goodwill provided the perfect cover for their true work. Yet every award ceremony felt like a lie, and every press interview was a carefully choreographed dance around the cosmic truth they guarded. Behind the gleaming public laboratories, the real work continued in the deep silo, where the alien data stream was slowly, painstakingly being translated into a new science for humanity. This double life demanded constant vigilance. Corporate intelligence agents, posing as journalists and potential partners, probed for the secret research they were sure lay behind the public's success. Government auditors arrived with smiling faces and sharp questions, their checklists a minefield of potential exposure. Aris and Alara became masters of misdirection, feeding just enough genuine, secondary innovation to the public project to satisfy curiosity and maintain their funding, all while the core of their work remained buried and invisible. The strain of maintaining the lie was immense, a constant low hum of paranoia that threatened to fray their nerves. It was Alara who proposed their most audacious long-term solution. "We cannot be the only ones who know," she argued one night, her voice weary but resolute. "The truth is too heavy for two people to carry forever," and so they began a quiet, secret search. They identified the brightest and most open-minded young researchers within the Prometheus Initiative, those who asked the right kind of impossible questions. To this select few, they offered not a job, but a calling. They became mentors in a hidden academy, slowly revealing layers of the truth, teaching them to see the patterns in ancient myths and the echoes in modern physics, preparing them for the day when the secret would need new guardians. They were no longer just protecting a truth, they were building a lineage. With each passing year, the Institute grew, its public reputation a shield of impeccable credibility. Yet its heart remained a secret, kept by a small, trusted circle, a family bound by the most profound knowledge in human history. They were planting a forest whose true height would only be revealed long after they were gone. The launch was a silent fireflower, blooming in the blackness, visible only on their private monitors. This probe, christened Legacy 1, was humanity's first true child of the stars, its hull woven with alloys, and its drives guided by principles the world's leading physicists would call magic. Aris watched the telemetry stream with a profound, quiet ache in his chest. He and Alara were no longer young rebels. They were architects, and this was their greatest, most secret work. Yet within their own institute, a new generation chafed at their caution. Why hide this? They argued. With this technology, we could have colonies on Mars in a decade, a generation shipped to Alpha Centauri in a century. We are holding humanity back. Alara met their fervent gazes with the patience of someone who had seen a temple fall. A faster ship does not make a wiser crew, she would tell them. The Watchers did not fall because their technology was weak. They fell because they were not ready for what they found. Giving a child a starship is not a gift, it is a death sentence. We must earn our place. They held the line, a decision that felt increasingly lonely as the years turned their hair to silver. Then Legacy 1's first major data dump arrived. It was not just stellar cartography. The probe's sophisticated Watcher-derived sensors, tuned to listen for the specific resonance of sentient technology, had painted a picture of the local galactic arm that was breathtakingly, terrifyingly alive. Faint, structured signals peppered the void. Some were simple repeating mathematical sequences, like the one they had received. Others were complex, overlapping broadcasts, the equivalent of 100 different civilizations all talking at once. The galaxy was not a silent, empty graveyard. It was a crowded marketplace, and humanity had been sitting in a silent room at the back, too afraid to open the door. Late one night, Aris sat surrounded by the new star charts, the intricate web of signals overlaid like a neural network across the cosmos. He traced a line from one faint echo to another, his finger pausing on a dense cluster of activity. His breath caught. The pattern was familiar. He called up the oldest files on his terminal, the original resonance maps from the Scottish Standing Stone and the Greek Codex. He laid the ancient stellar coordinates over the probe's new map of living signals. The alignment was not perfect, but it was unmistakable. The echoes of the fallen watchers, the very distress signal that had started his journey a lifetime ago, was not just a history lesson or a warning. It was a roadmap. The fallen civilization had not just hidden Earth. In their final act, they had charted a safe passage through the galactic community, pointing toward potential allies and away from the silent, hungry voids where predators like the Star Eater might still lurk. They had left a trail of breadcrumbs for their ward, a path to follow when it was finally strong enough and wise enough to leave the cradle. The star charts from the probe were more than a map, they were a key. Late into the night, Aris and Alara watched as their most powerful computers wove the new galactic data with the ancient Watcher resonance patterns. Slowly, a single, luminous pathway resolved from the stellar noise, a river of safe transit flowing through the cosmos. At its end shone a star system with a world of liquid water and a stable atmosphere, a world the Watchers had clearly designated as a sanctuary. It was not just a new planet, it was a lifeboat. The discovery was both a triumph and a terrible weight. They now possessed the ultimate insurance policy for the human species, a secret escape route if the shield ever failed or if another cosmic threat emerged. But this power came with a paralyzing moral dilemma. When do you decide a world is lost? When do you uproot 100 generations of history and culture for the mere possibility of a future? The Institute fractured once more. The younger faction, led by their most brilliant astrophysicist, argued for immediate, secret preparation. We build the Ark now, in orbit, they insisted. To wait is to risk having no escape when the crisis arrives. It is our duty to ensure survival. Alara heard the echo of her own younger self in their passion, but now she heard the ghost of Ares' sacrifice in Cambodia. Survival is more than biology, she countered, her voice soft but firm. It is memory, it is art, it is the sum of all we are. To flee as panicked refugees is to save the body, but lose the soul. We must not run from Earth, we must become worthy of this gift. Aris, standing before the holographic image of the new world, made the final call. They would not build an ark. Instead, they would encode the complete coordinates, the transit data, and all the necessary science into a single, resilient data crystal. This crystal would be sealed inside a vault of their own design, a chamber protected by a time lock that could only be opened by a unanimous decision of a future council of the Institute's directors, a generation they would never meet. It was the most profound act of trust in human history. They were placing the fate of their entire species into the hands of their unknown successors, betting that future people would be wiser, more united, and more prepared than they were. As the heavy, alloy door to the archive hissed shut, its chronometer beginning a countdown of 100 years, a final, crisp transmission arrived through the silent communicator. It contained no complex data, only a simple, clear phrase in a language they understood in their minds. The guardianship is yours. The message was not an assignment or a burden. It was a declaration of faith. The long childhood of humanity was over. The morning they signed the transfer of authority was unnervingly quiet. There was no ceremony, no crowd, only the soft click of a stylus on a digital pad. Aris and Alara handed the directorship to Dr. Lena Petrova, the young physicist whose mind could hold both the vast equations of cosmic engineering and the profound weight of their ethical cost. She had been their student, their colleague, and now she was their successor. The trust they placed in her was absolute, a final, deliberate act of faith in the future they had built. Letting go of the daily control was a physical ache, like releasing a breath held for decades. But they knew the Institute had to grow beyond them, to adapt to a world they could no longer predict. Their retirement was not an end to their vigilance, but a change in its form. They moved to a secluded observatory built into a mountainside, a place with wide windows open to the sky. Here, they began their final, most personal project. Together, they started writing the true, unvarnished history of everything. The fallen stars, the Star Eater, the desperate choices in crumbling temples, and the silent burden of the shield. They encoded it not in a digital file that could be hacked, but in a complex linguistic cipher woven into a seemingly benign series of botanical studies. This record was their failsafe, a message in a bottle for their successors, to be deciphered only if the Institute's core mission was ever forgotten or betrayed. From their new home, they watched the stars not as targets or threats, but as old friends. The silence of their days was a stark contrast to the frantic decades that had come before, a peace they had fought a secret war to secure for everyone else. Their life's work was now in the hands of a new generation, a chain of guardians stretching into a future they would never see. They had passed the torch, and in the quiet hum of the universe, they found a profound contentment, two silent sentinels keeping watch over a sleeping world. Their observatory was not a fortress of secrets, but a place of public wonder. With their personal resources, Aris and Alara constructed a planetarium nestled near their mountain home, a dome of glass and stone that drew families and schoolchildren. Its official mission was to explore the deep connection between human mythology and the cosmos. Every show, every exhibit was a carefully crafted lesson. They narrated the Greek legend of Orion, but the star positions on the dome matched the precise resonance frequency of a beacon in the Egyptian desert. They told the Aboriginal story of the emu in the sky, but the dark dust clouds highlighted formed the same pattern as the safe galactic pathway from the Watcher's charts. The truth was not hidden, it was woven into the very fabric of the stories, a ghost in the machine of human imagination. This required meticulous, constant vigilance. Every script was reviewed a dozen times, every animation checked for accidental clarity. They walked a razor's edge, needing the message to be present for the right mind to find, yet invisible to the casual observer or the skeptical academic. The stakes were the highest they had ever been. They were not just teaching, they were fishing in the vast ocean of human curiosity, using myth as bait and a hidden truth as the hook. The planetarium's central design was their masterstroke, a grand mural of the night sky that spanned the entire entrance hall. To most, it was a beautiful map of constellations. But to someone who had truly absorbed the subtle lessons within the shows, the fixed stars formed a solvable celestial cipher, a riddle whose answer was a single set of geographic coordinates. They had built the perfect filter, one crisp autumn evening, long after the last visitors had departed. A soft but persistent knock echoed through their private residence. Answering the door, they found a young woman standing there, her face illuminated by the porch light and burning with an insatiable curiosity. In her hands, she held a notebook filled with complex stellar alignments and annotated myth cycles. "I solved your puzzle," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and awe. "But the coordinates led me here. Now please, tell me what the stories are really about." Her name was Maya, and her notebook was a map of a mind already halfway to the stars. Eris and Alara brought her inside, the mountain air cool and the silence heavy with unspoken history. They did not offer her answers. Instead, they offered her a cup of tea and a challenge. For weeks, they presented her with curated fragments, a simulated version of their own long-ago quest. They gave her the raw archaeological data from a dozen disparate sites, the untranslated glyphs, the geological surveys showing impossible energy readings. They watched, their own hearts pounding with a familiar tension, as her brilliant mind began to connect dots that had no right to be connected. The true test was not her intellect, but her character. When she hit a wall, did she grow frustrated or more focused? When a piece of evidence contradicted a cherished theory, did she dismiss it or let it reshape her entire understanding? They saw in her the same relentless integrity that had cost them everything, the unwavering belief that the truth, no matter how terrifying, was always preferable to a comfortable lie. They decided to trust her. Her official initiation was a quiet affair, held in the planetarium under the silent gaze of the encoded mural. They began not with tales of cosmic predators, but with the hard, tangible evidence of human history. They showed her the precise astronomical alignments of pyramids built millennia apart, the shared mathematical constants in temple designs from cultures that never met. They let the sheer weight of the anthropological anomaly speak for itself, guiding her to the precipice of the impossible and letting her peer over the edge on her own. The future of their entire mission, the safety of a planet, now rested on the shoulders of this one young woman. Then, one afternoon, she burst into their study, her laptop open to a comparative mythology database. Her voice was electric with discovery. She had cross-referenced an Aboriginal Dreamtime narrative about the celestial emu with a low-level energy signal the Institute passively monitored from the southern hemisphere. The myth described the emu's path as a creator's road, and the signal's modulation perfectly matched the safe transit resonance from the Watcher's Galactic Map. She had not just found a pattern, she had independently verified a core piece of the truth using the very tools they had provided. Eris met Alara's gaze across the room. In that single, silent look, decades of fear and isolation finally melted away, replaced by a profound and soaring hope. The legacy was no longer a burden they carried, but a living flame they had successfully passed on. The solar storm was a silent killer, a coronal mass ejection of unprecedented size, hurling itself toward Earth. The world's space weather centers saw only a major event, but Maya's new models, built on the subtle principles of Watcher mathematics, saw the terrifying truth. The flare's unique magnetic signature would not just paint the skies with auroras, it would induce a current powerful enough to fry the planet's most sensitive transformers, collapsing power grids and plunging continents into a darkness that could last for years. With only 48 hours until impact, she presented her findings to the Institute's public-facing crisis team, her heart hammering. She attributed the precision of the prediction to a breakthrough in chaotic systems analysis, a lie that tasted like ash in her mouth. The team, trusting the Institute's hard-won reputation, acted without question. They coordinated a global, controlled power down of critical infrastructure, a maneuver so complex it was like performing open-heart surgery on the entire human civilization. When the storm hit, the world saw only a magnificent light show, unaware of the catastrophic blackout that had just been narrowly averted. The scientific community hailed the Institute for its foresight, for saving the global network without a single megawatt of loss. Meyer accepted the accolades with a gracious, professional smile, all while carrying the crushing weight of the secret. Her own mentor on the public team, a brilliant man she admired, praised her innovative model, and she had to look him in the eye and accept credit for a discovery that was not hers. That night, the Institute held a small, private celebration. The mood was buoyant, a rare moment of untainted victory. Yet for Maya, the champagne felt hollow. She stood by a window, watching the city lights glitter below, each one a testament to the lie she was forced to uphold. Aris found her there, his own reflection, ghosting the glass beside hers. He said nothing, his eyes holding a deep, understanding sympathy. Then, with a motion so casual it seemed almost incidental, he pressed a small, cold object into her hand. It was a simple, unmarked key. Her fingers closed around it, and she felt the weight of a century of guardianship, of a future she was now irrevocably responsible for shaping. The celebration continued around them, but in that silent exchange, the entire legacy of the fallen stars passed from one generation to the next. The mountain air was thin and cold the night the stars began to speak. A torrent of pure information, a directed pulse from the last known coordinates of the Watchers, flooded the Institute's receivers. It was not a warning or a test, but a final gift, the complete cultural and scientific history of an entire civilization, bequeathed to their successors. The data stream was so immense it pushed their quantum servers to the brink, requiring every ounce of processing power just to contain the deluge of 1 billion years of knowledge. Down in the medical wing, Aris felt the hum of that distant transmission, not through machines, but in his bones. He was fading, his breath shallow, the decades of sacrifice finally claiming their due. Alara held one of his hands, while a live feed from the main lab glowed on a screen beside the bed, a silent testament to the legacy he had built. His final moments were a bridge stretched between two worlds, caught between a personal goodbye and the birth of a new chapter for all of humanity. With a strength that seemed to draw from the transmission itself, he squeezed Alara's hand and turned his gaze to the worried faces of his successors gathered in the room. "Do not start with the starships," he whispered, his voice a fragile thread of sound. "Begin with the medicine. Start with the ecology. Use their knowledge to heal our world, to extend a single human life, to clean a single river. Let our first step into their legacy be a step that helps everyone take their next." The wisdom of two worlds now rested in human hands, a responsibility more profound than any shield or weapon. As he closed his eyes for the last time, a profound and unexpected calm settled over the Institute. The frantic energy of the download gave way to a purposeful, reverent silence. The work would continue, but it was no longer a desperate race against an unseen clock. It was a careful, deliberate cultivation, guided now by the combined wisdom of two species, one just beginning its journey, the other ensuring it would not have to walk alone. Alara did not return to the silo. The planetarium became her home, her sanctuary, and her final classroom. In the quiet hours after closing, she would walk the empty halls, her fingers trailing over the constellations etched into the mural, each one a memory, a secret, a story of a love that had saved the world. Her new exhibits were masterpieces of subtlety. A display on Native American star lore included a perfect replica of a Pawnee star chart, but the specific arrangement of beads on its fringe spelled out a Watcher resonance frequency in base 12 mathematics. A lecture on the navigational techniques of Polynesian voyagers carefully explained how their understanding of wave patterns mirrored the principles of subspace communication. She was not hiding the truth. She was dressing it in the clothes of myth, making it beautiful and accessible, waiting for the next curious mind to see the pattern she had woven into the very fabric of human wonder. The loneliness was a constant, quiet companion. There were nights she would look at the stars and feel the weight of being one of the last souls alive who remembered the taste of fear in a Scottish mist, the crushing silence of an Egyptian tomb, the blinding light at the world's end. The world slept peacefully under a sky she had helped to shield, and she was the sole keeper of the terrifying reason why. Her solace was found in the light of understanding that dawned in a student's eyes. She began mentoring a small, select group of the planetarium's most promising interns, not with grand revelations, but with gentle nudges. She taught them to question not just the how, but the why of ancient knowledge. She showed them how to listen for the echoes and the silence between the notes of history. In doing so, she forged a new family, bound not by blood, but by a shared reverence for the hidden architecture of the world. One evening, seated at Aris's old desk, she opened their encrypted botanical manuscript. To its intricate cipher, she added a final, personal addendum. It was not a record of new science, but of a final philosophy. She detailed his last wish, his whispered plea to use the Watcher's legacy for healing before reaching for the stars. She wrote of the profound responsibility of stewardship, that true power was not in domination, but in nurturing, in protecting the fragile miracle of a single life, a single ecosystem. This became her most vital work. She ensured that this core tenet was embedded into the Institute's guiding protocols, a moral compass for the generations to come. The mission would forever be one of protection through understanding, a shield woven from wisdom itself. Her passing was as quiet as her final years. The Institute held a small, private ceremony beneath the planetarium's dome, the very stars she had loved looking down upon them. There were no grand eulogies about saving the world, only simple stories of a teacher, a guide, a keeper of gentle truths. And as the last words were spoken, the new directors turned their eyes from the memorial and back to the silent consoles, the humming sensors, the endless stream of data from the void. The work continued. The vigil was eternal. The silent alarm bloomed across the main display, a crimson splinter of data in the tranquil darkness of the Institute. It was not the Star Eater. This was something new, a gravitational anomaly drifting through the void like a slow, deliberate tide. Its trajectory, an unerring line, that intersected Earth's orbit in exactly 6 months. Dr. Lena Petrova, the new director, felt the weight of Aris and Alara's legacy settle on her shoulders not as a comfort, but as a final examination. The entity was not predatory, merely oblivious, a cosmic iceberg on a collision course with their tiny, sheltered world. Its sheer mass would destabilize planetary orbits, triggering an extinction-level event through gravitational chaos alone. A direct attack was impossible, a concept as primitive as throwing a stone at a hurricane. The solution, drawn from the deepest layers of the shared Watcher human archives, was one of breathtaking subtlety. They would not fight the anomaly. They would persuade it. The plan, codenamed Lullaby, involved using the planet's entire energy grid as a single, massive speaker. By pulsing a specific, complex harmonic resonance through every power line and communication satellite, they could create a standing wave in spacetime itself, a gentle pressure that would nudge the colossal entity onto a new, harmless path. It was a maneuver of immense precision, a single, perfect note played on the instrument of an entire world. The cost of failure was absolute, and the need for secrecy was paramount. A global panic would shatter the coordination required, turning their symphony into a cacophony. Lena had to persuade the world's governments to hand over the keys to their civilization, without telling them why. One by one, in secured bunkers and soundproofed rooms, she met with a handful of people who needed to know. She showed them the data, the silent, approaching doom. She presented Lullaby not as a request, but as the only option. The trust Aris and Alara had spent a lifetime building was now their only currency. It was a trust placed in a ghost, in the reputation of an institute that had quietly averted a dozen smaller crises. Its credibility, the only shield against the terror of the truth. The final vote was unanimous. On the appointed day, the world went about its business, completely unaware. As the evening settled across the planet, a strange, low hum was reported in a few remote areas, a vibration felt in the bones more than heard by the ears. Power flickered momentarily in some cities, a blip dismissed as a minor grid fluctuation. In the Institute's control center, Lena and her team watched the global energy draw, a ballet of terawatts flowing in perfect, synchronized rhythm. They were conducting a planet. The harmonic resonance built, a silent crescendo of focused will. On their screens, the anomaly's path began to curve, infinitesimally at first, then with growing certainty, sliding past Earth's orbital lane like a great ship avoiding a skiff. The entity passed by, utterly unaware of the desperate, elegant maneuver that had just saved the fragile world in its shadow. There were no celebrations, no headlines. The global power grid returned to normal. The few who knew exchanged only silent, solemn nods. The victory was absolute, and it would forever be a secret. In that quiet control room, Lena finally understood the true meaning of the legacy she had inherited. It was not about building a brighter future. It was about earning the right to have one at all, through acts of profound and silent guardianship that would never be recorded in any history book. Their legacy lives on in the quiet hum of machines the world will never see. The Institute endures, a hidden thread of guardianship woven through the fabric of human history. Its silent work ensuring the sky above remains a canvas of wonder, not a window to terror. Aris and Alara are not remembered by the public as saviors of the species. In the official records, they are merely the curious scientists who first listened carefully to the echoes in our oldest stories, the ones who saw a pattern in the stones and the stars where others saw only coincidence. Their true monument is not a statue, but a humanity itself, a civilization that is slowly, carefully, and safely growing, ready to take its place among the stars. Every quiet breakthrough in clean energy, every new understanding of cosmic consciousness, every child who looks up at the night sky with a sense of profound connection rather than fear, is a part of their unwritten story. We are all the beneficiaries of that first, impossible choice in a Scottish mist, forever guided by the wisdom of the fallen guardians who believed we were worth the wait.